The galaxy was vast, cold, and indifferent. It was a place where countless species fought for dominance, but the name of humanity was whispered only in forgotten corners of ancient libraries. The universe had moved on. Humans had been erased, relegated to nothing more than a fable, a legend spoken about only in hushed tones. The destruction of their civilization was seen as a necessary step in preserving the order of the galaxy. A war had raged centuries ago, one that ended with humanity's obliteration. Or so it was believed. On a remote, barren planet, far from the prying eyes of the galaxy's most powerful species, a handful of survivors had managed to keep their existence a secret. They lived in the shadows, hiding their technologies, their knowledge, and their strength. The planet itself was a perfect hiding place, isolated and nearly impossible to find unless someone was specifically looking for it. But the humans on this planet were not merely hiding. They were surviving, rebuilding, adapting. They knew the galaxy believed them to be gone. They knew the story that had been crafted about their extinction, a tale spun to ensure no one would ever question the reign of the galactic powers. It had worked. No one thought twice about the humans who had once ruled, feared, and admired across the stars. The galaxy had forgotten them. And for a time, that had been enough. But not anymore. The protagonist, known only as Captain Ilara among her people, stood in front of a crude monitor in the heart of the underground facility. The hum of machinery echoed through the narrow hallways as the flickering screen in front of her displayed something she had hoped to see for years. A signal, a distress call that had been drifting through the vastness of space for hundreds of years, unheard, unnoticed until now. Ilara's fingers hovered over the keys, her breath catching in her throat as she activated the full system. The message wasn't new, but it had been buried in the archives, hidden from view for centuries. It had taken years of research and countless hours of decoding, but she had found it. A signal that led to the last known location of humanity's greatest outpost, a colony that was supposed to be the cornerstone of the human empire in the galaxy. "I thought we were all gone," Ilara murmured under her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. The message was clear now. The survivors were out there somewhere. A chance. No, an opportunity. It was a whisper of hope in the dark void, the spark that would ignite a fire that had been long extinguished. "Captain, we've got something," called out Jace, her trusted lieutenant, from across the room. Ilara turned, her face set with determination. "What is it, Jace?" He pointed to a small readout on the screen, where coordinates were now displayed. They weren't far, just a few jumps away. A small, isolated sector, tucked deep within uncharted space. The signal. It's not just any distress call. It's human. From the old colony, Jace said, his voice thick with disbelief. Ilara didn't hesitate. The moment was finally here. Their people had waited too long, endured too much. The galaxy had forgotten them, but the time had come to remind it that humanity was never truly gone. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered. "We leave at once." The galaxy had believed they had erased humanity from history. They had erased our names, our faces, our legacy. But they had made one grave mistake. They had underestimated the one thing that no alien force could ever fully understand: the power of human resilience. The days following Ilara's discovery were a blur of activity. The survivors, a hardened group of scientists, engineers, and soldiers, moved with purpose. The underground facility, a massive labyrinth of tunnels, laboratories, and old military bunkers, had once served as a place of refuge. Now it was alive with purpose and urgency. The task was clear. They would find the colony, rebuild their strength, and reclaim what was lost. Ilara stood in front of a massive holographic map, her fingers tracing the coordinates of the colony. The signal was weak but unmistakable. Her mind raced with the possibilities. What would they find? A few survivors? Or was the colony long gone, destroyed like so many of their predecessors? The doubts gnawed at her, but she pushed them aside. There was no turning back now. "We're ready to go, Captain," Jace reported, stepping into the room, his face grim. He had been with her since the beginning, a reliable right hand who never wavered. He understood the stakes better than anyone. "The fleet's prepped. All ships are operational." Ilara nodded, her eyes never leaving the map. "Good. We leave in 30 minutes. The fleet was modest, fewer than 20 ships, each a testament to human ingenuity. The ships had been built using salvaged alien technology, repurposed and enhanced by the survivors' brilliant engineers. They weren't the sleek warships of old, but they were fast, deadly, and adaptable. Their most powerful asset was not just the technology they had at their disposal, but their tactical advantage. Humanity was known for its ability to adapt, to think outside the box, and that was something the galactic powers hadn't accounted for. As they prepped for departure, Ilara gathered her crew. They were a diverse group, humans, yes, but also a few defected aliens who had joined their cause. Some had come from species oppressed by the Galactic Empire. Others were deserters from the very forces hunting humanity. They all shared a common goal: to bring an end to the reign of the Galactic Empire and restore humanity's place in the galaxy. "We're not just looking for survivors," Ilara said to them as they stood in the briefing room, her voice steady. "We're looking for the heart of humanity's legacy. We were more than just a species to be feared. We were builders, creators, leaders. We left behind tools, knowledge, and power, and we will use all of it to take back our rightful place in the stars." The crew's eyes lit up with determination. They had heard the stories about the human empire's vast technologies, its legendary warriors, its diplomats who had brokered peace among the stars. What humanity had achieved had been lost to time, but it was there, buried in ruins, hidden in archives, waiting to be rediscovered. The journey would be dangerous. The galactic powers had no idea that humanity was still alive, but they would soon find out. If the fleet encountered any of the Empire's patrols, they would be outnumbered and outgunned. But Ilara wasn't concerned with odds. Humanity had always been underestimated. They had survived against all odds once, and they would do so again. The fleet took off in a silent formation, the stars around them stretching into infinite darkness. As they passed through the first few jumps, a sense of unity began to settle in. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming everything they had lost. Their history, their future, their destiny. Hours later, they arrived at the edge of the sector where the distress signal had originated. It was a desolate place, uncharted and ignored by most of the galaxy. The star systems were sparsely populated, and the planets were far from thriving. Yet the signal led them here, to a planet that had once been home to a thriving colony. They dropped out of hyperspace with a jolt, the cold expanse of space stretching out before them. Ilara felt a shiver run down her spine. This was it. This was where humanity's future could either be secured or shattered forever. "Landing in 10 minutes, Captain," Jace said, his voice barely audible over the comms. Ilara stood, her gaze fixed on the dark planet below. The legacy of humanity had been erased. But now, it was time for the galaxy to remember. The planet loomed large in the viewports of the fleet's flagship, the Reclamation. A pale blue orb surrounded by a ring of debris and ice, it was a graveyard of forgotten history. This was once a thriving human colony, a beacon of humanity's expansion across the stars. But now, it was nothing more than a husk, scarred by war and centuries of neglect. Deploying landing parties, Jace's voice crackled over the comms. "We're a go." Ilara's grip tightened around the armrest as the fleet entered the planet's atmosphere. Her heart pounded, a mixture of anticipation and dread settling in her chest. What would they find? The distress signal had led them here, but the wreckage around the planet told a different story. This was no peaceful colony. This was a site of devastation, one that spoke of war, survival, and struggle. They touched down on the planet's surface, the once bustling colony now reduced to ruins. The landing zone was eerily quiet, broken only by the distant sounds of crumbling buildings and the low hum of the fleet's engines powering down. Ilara was the first to step out of the ship, boots crunching against the frost-covered ground. The air was thin, cold enough to freeze a breath before it could escape. But it wasn't the temperature that sent a chill down her spine. It was the silence. The colonists had vanished. The city, now a labyrinth of shattered structures and rusted vehicles, seemed abandoned, empty, as though its former inhabitants had been erased in an instant. It was hard to believe that this had once been a thriving hub of human activity, a testament to their ingenuity and power. But there were no bodies, no signs of life, only the broken remnants of a past long gone. "Commander, look at this," Jace called from a nearby building. Ilara turned to see him crouched by a half-destroyed datapad, one of the few remaining pieces of technology that hadn't been reduced to rubble. It flickered on, displaying a set of coordinates. "They're still out there," Jace said, his voice taut with hope and disbelief. This could lead us to something, or someone." Ilara nodded, her mind already racing. They had to move quickly. The longer they lingered here, the greater the risk that someone, or something, would detect their presence. The Galactic Empire wouldn't sit idly by when they discovered humanity's return. Their every move was being watched, and Ilara knew it was only a matter of time before they came. "We're not alone," she said, her voice resolute. "Gather the team. We follow the coordinates." The search party regrouped, their footsteps echoing through the ruined city as they followed the signal. As they navigated the decaying streets, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was as if the very planet itself held its breath, waiting for something to awaken from the past. And then, as they neared the coordinates, something flickered in the distance. A faint light, just a glimmer, but it was enough to stir the hope in Ilara's chest. "Over there," she ordered, her voice urgent. "Move fast." The team quickened their pace, adrenaline surging through their veins. The ruins were more than just wreckage. They were a puzzle. Every destroyed building, every burnt-out vehicle, seemed to hold a clue. Humanity had been here, but it had been erased. Ilara could feel it in her bones. Whatever lay ahead, it was the key to their future. As they reached the light, Ilara's heart raced. In the center of a collapsed structure, half buried beneath debris, was a small underground entrance. The light had been coming from a hidden room, one that had somehow survived the centuries of decay. They had found it. "Prepare to breach," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. The team moved into position, weapons drawn. With a swift motion, Ilara ordered the door to be cleared. It swung open with a creak, revealing a dark hallway. The air inside was stale, but the room felt strangely untouched, like a vault of forgotten knowledge. As the team moved deeper inside, Ilara's eyes scanned every inch of the space. There in the center of the room was a relic from a time long past, a massive data core, the heart of the colony's operations, still intact and humming with power, a direct link to humanity's lost history. "This is it," Ilara whispered, her voice filled with awe and determination. "This is the legacy we've been searching for." They had found the heart of humanity's past, and with it, the future of their revenge. The discovery of the data core was nothing short of monumental. It was the heart of the old colony, pulsing with the long-forgotten knowledge of humanity's empire, research, military strategies, blueprints for technologies that had been lost to time. Ilara stood before it, feeling both a surge of power and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. They had only scratched the surface, but the potential of what they'd uncovered was enough to ignite a fire in her chest. "Captain," Jace said, his voice breaking into her thoughts. He was at a terminal, hands flying over the controls as he accessed the data core. This is massive. We're talking entire archives of humanity's scientific, military, and diplomatic records. The key to everything we lost." Ilara nodded, her eyes fixed on the flickering screens. "We need to extract everything we can. This isn't just a victory for us. It's for everyone who suffered under the Empire's rule. As Jace continued his work, Ilara's mind turned to the bigger picture. The humans had been erased from the galaxy's history, but their return would not go unnoticed for long. The galaxy was vast, but it was also highly interconnected. The Empire's eyes were everywhere, and it wouldn't take long before their network of spies and satellites picked up the signal emanating from the colony's data core. Ilara was right. Word began to spread quickly. The ancient colonies were far from forgotten, and now that humanity's existence had been proven beyond any shadow of a doubt, the galactic powers would begin to react. The most powerful factions, the ones that had united to wipe humanity from existence all those years ago, were not about to let a threat like this slip through their fingers. Within days, the first response came in the form of an intercepted transmission. It was the Aldari Empire, an ancient and ruthless species that had been one of humanity's greatest adversaries during the Great War. Their massive fleet was one of the most formidable in the galaxy, and they had the resources and reach to find any hiding species. The Aldari were the first to deploy a warship into the sector where Ilara's fleet had landed. A ship so large it was nearly invisible to the naked eye. A stealth ship, designed for infiltration and assassination. "I told you it wouldn't take long," Jace said grimly as he watched the incoming transmission on the bridge. "They're coming for us, Captain." Ilara's jaw clenched. She had expected this, but it didn't make it any easier. The Empire would want to extinguish this spark before it could catch fire. "Prepare for combat," she ordered, her voice calm but heavy with resolve. "We won't run, and we won't hide. We face them head-on." The next few hours were a blur of frantic preparation. Ilara's fleet wasn't large, but it was fast and agile, equipped with the best technology humanity had developed in its long years of isolation. They weren't going to simply retreat into the shadows. It was time to remind the galaxy that humanity had once been a force to be reckoned with, and would be again. As the Aldari fleet came into view, Ilara's fleet entered a battle formation. The darkness of space was suddenly alive with movement, ships darting and weaving through the stars, each one a predator on the hunt. The humans had no illusions. They were outnumbered, but this was their fight. This was the first strike in a long war. The first wave of Aldari fighters launched from the massive warship, sleek, deadly, and precise. Ilara's crew moved with practiced efficiency, engaging the enemy with lightning speed. The humans had been out of the fight for far too long, but they weren't rusty. Their battle tactics were as sharp as ever, honed in the fires of countless wars, and the fleet's coordination was flawless. The battle was fierce, but the humans managed to strike the first blow. Using their superior speed and knowledge of alien technology, they disabled several Aldari ships before the main fleet had even fully engaged. But this was only the beginning. As more Aldari ships arrived, Ilara knew that they couldn't win through force alone. Their true advantage lay in their ability to outsmart the Empire's forces. "Deploy the EMP," Ilara ordered. "We'll blind them long enough to make our escape." The EMP pulse shot out from the reclamation, disrupting the Aldari's communications and targeting systems, throwing the massive warship into chaos. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it gave Ilara's fleet the opening they needed. "Fall back to the colony's orbit," Ilara commanded as her fleet began to retreat, slipping into the shadows once more. "We're not done yet, but we've made our point." As they retreated, Ilara's thoughts turned to the future. The Aldari might have been beaten back, but the war was far from over. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once before, but now humanity was back. And the reckoning had just begun. The retreat was swift and calculated. Ilara's fleet had made its escape from the Aldari warship, but they knew it wouldn't be long before the Empire regrouped and launched a more coordinated attack. This was just the beginning. Humanity's resurgence had sent ripples across the galaxy, and every major power would soon take notice. Ilara stood in the quiet of her command room, staring out the viewport. The distant stars blinked like forgotten memories. Her mind was heavy with the weight of their situation. They had won the first battle, but their enemies were numerous, and their resources vast. Humanity had the heart and the will to fight, but they were still rebuilding their strength, their numbers, their alliances. "We need more intel," Ilara muttered to herself. "We need to understand what we're up against." She turned to Jace, who had just entered the room. He looked worn, tired, but determined. The battle had taken a toll on everyone, but they had done what was needed. For now, they had bought time. "We've secured the data core," Jace said, his voice steady. "It's all there, Captain. Everything. But we're only scratching the surface. There's more, so much more, hidden in the archive. We could spend years decrypting it all." Ilara nodded slowly. The data core was humanity's lifeline, but there was no time for years of slow decryption. The galaxy was closing in on them, and the Empire would be relentless in its pursuit. "We don't have years," she said, her voice sharp with purpose. "We need to accelerate the process. We need to learn everything we can, and we need to do it now." The old tech, the forgotten relics of humanity's once great civilization, held unimaginable power. Weapons, ships, technologies, some of which could change the course of this war. But the problem was the same. The data was scattered. Some pieces were encrypted, others were buried beneath layers of obsolete systems, long abandoned and overlooked by the galaxy's conquerors. "We'll have to prioritize," Jace suggested. "We start with military assets. If we can arm ourselves properly, we might stand a chance against the Empire's fleet. Once we have the firepower, we can focus on the more long-term plans, diplomatic or otherwise." Ilara's eyes darkened with the weight of the decision. "Agreed. We fight first. We take back what's ours. Then, once we're strong enough, we start building alliances." As she turned to leave the room, a message beeped on her console. The message was cryptic, but it came from a familiar source, a distress signal. It was faint but unmistakable, another hidden remnant of humanity. "This is Captain Ilara," she said, her fingers tapping the command codes to open the channel. "Who is this?" The voice that came through the transmission was ragged, desperate, but unmistakably human. "Captain, if you're out there, we need help," the voice crackled. "We're not the only ones left. There's a small colony. We need extraction. The Alderi are closing in, and we're outnumbered." Ilara's heart clenched. Another colony. Another piece of humanity that had survived, hidden away, struggling to hold on. She could feel the weight of their words, the desperation in the tone. They were in the same position her people had been in not long ago, alone, forgotten, but not without hope. "Where are you?" Ilara asked, her voice firm with resolve. "We'll come for you." The coordinates flashed across the screen, and Ilara's mind immediately went to work. It wasn't far, just a few days' jump away. It would be a dangerous mission, but they couldn't afford to ignore it. If there were more survivors out there, they needed to find them. The more humans they could bring together, the stronger they would become. And with the Empire already on their tail, they couldn't afford to leave anyone behind. "We'll need to move fast," Jace said, already pulling up the necessary data. "The Alderi are probably already tracking the transmission. If we're going to rescue them, we need to be quick." Ilara nodded. "Prepare the fleet. We're going after them. And make no mistake, this is our fight. We bring them back, or we bring them justice." As the crew began preparations, Ilara stood by the viewport again, her thoughts heavy. The galaxy had tried to erase humanity, to bury its legacy, its history, and its people. But now, one by one, the ghosts of humanity's past were returning. They had been forgotten, erased from history. But the galaxy would soon learn the truth. Humanity was not gone. They had only been waiting. Ilara stood on the bridge of the reclamation, watching the cold, endless expanse of space ahead of her. The coordinates had been set. Her fleet was en route to the small, isolated colony that had called out for help. The distress signal had been clear, a cry for aid that echoed through the darkness of space. Humanity was not alone. There were survivors out there, scattered like remnants of a shattered empire, but united by the hope of returning to power. "We're within range," Jace reported, his voice cutting through the tension that filled the air. "Approaching the coordinates now. No sign of enemy ships yet, but we can't be sure." Ilara nodded grimly. It wasn't the first time she'd set out on a mission under the shadow of uncertainty, and it wouldn't be the last. Every move they made had consequences. They couldn't afford to fail, not with the eyes of the galaxy now trained on them. The Empire would be hunting them with everything they had, and the window to act was closing fast. The colony was small, situated on the edge of a desolate planet, a lifeless world with little to offer except a sanctuary for those who could remain hidden. From the transmission, it was clear the survivors had been pushed to the brink. The Alderi, relentless and unforgiving, were closing in. This was no rescue mission. It was a desperate fight for survival. "Captain," Jace said, his voice laced with concern, "we're detecting multiple energy signatures. Looks like a fleet, a large one. The Alderi have found them." Ilara's stomach tightened. She had known it was coming, but the reality of it hit like a physical blow. The Alderi were faster, more numerous, and their tactics were honed through centuries of conquest. But they had underestimated humanity once before. And now, Ilara would make sure they did so again. "Prepare the fleet for combat," Ilara ordered, her voice cold. "We can't afford to let them fall. We strike first." The humans had been out of the galaxy's war for far too long, but they were far from helpless. Their ships, though smaller and less equipped than the Alderi juggernauts, had something the Empire couldn't anticipate: adaptability. The survivors had learned how to use every advantage, every piece of alien technology, to their favor. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting to reclaim their place in the galaxy. "Bring us in closer," Ilara commanded. "Get me a direct link to their command center." A few moments passed, and then the connection crackled to life. The face of the colony's leader appeared on the screen, a woman with streaks of gray in her hair, her expression weary but determined. "This is Captain Ilara," Ilara said, her voice sharp but reassuring. "We're here to help. We'll get you out of there." The woman's eyes flickered with hope, but she didn't relax. "We don't have long. The Alderi are already on their way. We've held them off so far, but our defenses are failing. You have to move fast." Ilara's gaze hardened. "We'll give them hell before they even land. Stay in position. We're coming in hot." As the fleet moved into position, Ilara's mind raced. This wouldn't be an easy battle. The Alderi fleet was vast, far larger than anything the humans had faced so far. But humanity's strength wasn't in their numbers. It was in their resourcefulness. They had one chance to strike, and they couldn't afford to miss. "Deploy all fighters," Ilara ordered. "Target their lead ships. Disable their communications. We can't let them coordinate." The first wave of fighters launched from the reclamation with precision, darting through space like a swarm of predatory insects. They targeted the Alderi fleet's capital ships, their advanced weapons systems locking onto weak points. The humans moved quickly, exploiting the Alderi's arrogance, just as they had when they first faced the Empire so many centuries ago. The battle was chaotic, but it was also controlled. Ilara watched as her fleet engaged the Alderi forces in a series of precise, calculated strikes. The Alderi were formidable, fast and powerful, but they lacked the unpredictability that humanity excelled at. The humans had spent years in isolation, adapting, learning, and now it was paying off. "We've got them on the run," Jace reported. "Their communications are down, and their fleet is disorganized. We're pushing them back." Ilara's heart surged with a mixture of relief and satisfaction. This wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. The Alderi were being outmaneuvered by a species they had long thought extinct. Humanity was returning, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. But Ilara knew this was just a temporary win. The Alderi would regroup, and the galaxy would soon know the truth of humanity's survival. For now, though, they had bought time. Time to grow stronger, to gather allies, and to make their next move. Keep the pressure on them, Ilara said, her voice filled with quiet determination. We don't stop until they're out of our space. The battle raged on, the tide of war shifting in humanity's favor for the first time in centuries. And for the first time in a long while, Ilara allowed herself a moment of hope. The universe would soon learn that humanity had been erased from history, but now they were coming back to rewrite it. The battle had been fierce, but humanity had emerged victorious. For now, the Alderi, once thought invincible, had been repelled, their fleet shattered and scattered. The survivors of the colony had been safely evacuated, and Ilara's fleet had returned to the shadows of space, regrouping and licking their wounds. But despite the victory, the storm was far from over. As Ilara paced the command deck of the Reclamation, she felt the weight of their situation bearing down on her once again. The victory had been significant, but it was only a small step in the grand war that was coming. The galaxy had been blind to humanity's potential for centuries, but now that they knew the truth, that humanity had survived, they would not remain idle for long. The Alderi were just the beginning. Other factions, powerful and dangerous in their own right, would soon take notice. Captain, Jace's voice interrupted her thoughts. I've been going through the data from the colony's archives. I think we found something. Ilara turned, her interest piqued. What have you got? Jace motioned to a holographic display, bringing up a map of the galaxy with a series of highlighted locations. It's a network, hidden installations, research outposts, and safe havens, places humanity established during the war. They were designed as fallback points, just in case things went south. Ilara stepped closer to the display. So, humanity had a plan. A contingency plan, Jace confirmed. It seems that after the war, they anticipated this kind of response. The installations are scattered across the galaxy. Some are older than others, but they could provide the resources we need to mount a real resistance. Ilara's mind raced. This was exactly the kind of thing they needed. The scattered remnants of humanity's once great civilization could provide the strength they required to take on the galaxy's most powerful factions. But this information was buried deep. It was a vast undertaking just to retrieve it, and they didn't have the luxury of time. How many locations? Ilara asked, narrowing her eyes. At least 24 that we know of, Jace replied. Some of them are in remote sectors, off the grid, hidden under layers of encryption. But with the right resources, we could get to them. Good, Ilara said, her voice hardening with resolve. We'll need all of them. Gather the fleet. We're going to hit every single one of these outposts. We'll need a much bigger fleet to take them all on, Jace pointed out. Some of these locations are deep in enemy territory. We'll make do with what we have, Ilara said, her voice unwavering. It's not about the size of our fleet. It's about the strike. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we leap before the Empire can respond. Jace hesitated but then nodded. Understood, Captain. As the fleet prepared for the next wave of operations, Ilara gathered her senior officers in the war room. Each face around the table reflected the same determination, tempered by the weight of the challenges ahead. We've shown the galaxy that humanity is back, Ilara began, addressing her crew. But now it's time for the next step. We have the advantage of surprise, and we'll use that to our advantage. We're going to find the other survivors, and we're going to arm them. Together, we'll build the resistance. Our first targets are these outposts. One of her officers, a strategist named Captain Rylan, spoke up. What about the Alderi? They'll know we're coming. We've already made our presence known, Ilara replied, her eyes steely. But they don't know where we'll strike next. We'll stay one step ahead. We've already taken down their fleet once. We'll do it again, and we'll do it to everyone who's ever tried to erase us. Ilara's words hung in the air, charging the room with a renewed sense of purpose. She could see the spark of defiance in each of their eyes. The time for hiding was over. The galaxy had thought humanity dead, erased from the pages of history. But now they were back, and they would not be silenced. As the fleet mobilized, Ilara stood at the center of it all. There was no going back. Every decision, every move from this point on, would shape the future of humanity. The galaxy had underestimated them once. It wouldn't happen again. The mission was underway, and Ilara's fleet moved through the void of space with a single purpose: to reclaim what was once lost. The locations of humanity's old outposts had been carefully plotted. Some were nestled on the fringes of known space, others buried deep within hostile territory. Each one represented a potential spark for the rebellion that was rapidly growing in the shadows. Ilara stood on the bridge of the reclamation, watching as her fleet moved through the endless expanse. Each jump into hyperspace felt like another step toward reclaiming humanity's place in the galaxy. The time for small victories was over. They were entering the heart of the Empire's domain, where danger was greatest, but also where the chance for true victory lay. "We're approaching the first outpost." Jace's voice broke through her thoughts. "It's on a moon orbiting a gas giant. The location checks out. No significant Imperial presence so far." Ilara's fingers drummed softly on the console in front of her, her gaze never leaving the viewport. "Good. We move fast. Set up the landing teams. I don't want to waste any time." Jace nodded and relayed the orders. Ilara had learned long ago that hesitation in moments like this meant death. They had to be swift, efficient. The Empire would soon recognize the shift in the tide. It was only a matter of time before they sent a response. The element of surprise was their greatest advantage, and they needed to exploit it before the galaxy's powers closed in. Within hours, her fleet entered the orbit of the moon. The first target, a small, abandoned facility once used for research, was within their grasp. The landing teams, led by experienced officers, disembarked, their boots hitting the cracked, barren surface. The air was thin, the ground brittle, but the site had been untouched by Imperial hands for centuries. It was an untouched treasure trove of resources and technology, one that could turn the tide in their favor. "We've secured the perimeter, Captain." Ryland's voice crackled over the comms. "We're beginning to access the central database." Ilara took a deep breath. This was the first of many such operations, but each success would build upon the last, growing their strength, their knowledge, their allies. They would continue to strike at the Empire, never giving them a chance to recover. The hours stretched into a tense silence as her team worked quickly, sifting through the ruins of the old research outpost. It was clear that the Empire hadn't bothered to come here. The technology was outdated, the systems barely functional, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the potential. These relics could give them the tools they needed to fight back. "Captain, you need to see this." Jace's voice crackled over the comms again. Ilara's heart skipped a beat as she made her way to the landing site. She found Jace standing before an old data terminal, his fingers running over the dusty surface. When he powered it on, a holographic display flared to life. A series of star maps appeared, highlighted with red dots. "These aren't just locations," Jace said, his voice filled with disbelief. "These are deep, secretive Imperial strongholds. They're not in any of their public databases. These are their real power centers." Ilara's pulse quickened. This was more than just a research facility. This was a treasure trove of intelligence, intelligence that could expose the Empire's deepest secrets. If they could infiltrate these strongholds, they could deal a crippling blow. "We've found our next targets," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the storm of possibilities swirling in her mind. "This changes everything." Back aboard the Reclamation, Ilara gathered her senior officers in the war room. The atmosphere was tense but filled with determination. They had just uncovered the Empire's hidden strongholds, their real power centers. The time had come to up the ante. The galaxy would no longer dismiss humanity as a myth. "We've been playing defense long enough," Ilara said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "These strongholds are the heart of the Empire's power. We're going to hit them where it hurts. We take these centers, we cripple the Empire's ability to respond. We'll send a message they won't forget." Captain Ryland stepped forward, his face grim but resolute. "It won't be easy. These strongholds are heavily fortified. We'll need more than just guerrilla tactics to take them down." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "We've got the element of surprise on our side. They'll never see us coming. We hit fast, and we hit hard. There's no turning back now." The plan was set. The fleet was mobilized. The time had come for humanity's return to the galaxy to be felt on a scale never before imagined. Every outpost they took, every piece of technology they secured, was another step toward reclaiming their rightful place. As the fleet prepared to launch their next strike, Ilara stood at the front of the bridge, watching as the stars stretched out before them. The battle was far from over. But humanity had a fire now, a fire that could not be extinguished. The galaxy had thought them gone, but they were back. And this time, they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their vengeance.